Welcome to VPG's Virtual Water Cooler Chat Podcast, a platform that features professionals across a variety of industries and promotes growth mindset principles with a central pillar of championing the achievements of women. Our conversations explore a wide spectrum of backgrounds, experiences, and perspectives, creating a vibrant mosaic that enriches our collective understanding and strengthens our commitment to growth and empowerment. Our guest interviewer is Eli Chan, a third-year undergraduate biology student at the University of Santa Barbara with an interest in applying his background to a career in patent law. Today, Eli will be speaking with Josepher Lee, a partner at Armond Wilson LLP. Josepher has a robust IP litigation practice spanning nationally in federal courts and before the U.S. Patent Office. An MIT-trained engineer, he has litigated patent, trade secret, and copyright cases involving all types of technologies. In 2024, Benchmark Litigation selected Josepher to its 20 and under list of top litigation attorneys. Let's get started.
Welcome, everybody, to the virtual water cooler chat. My name is Eli Chan, and I'm a third-year biology student at UC Santa Barbara. And I've been given the opportunity by Ashley and VPG to be an interviewer, and I really enjoyed this opportunity. And with that, I'd like to welcome and thank our guest, Josepher Lee.
Thank you, Eli. It's great to be here. And of course, thank you for having me.
Of course. Yeah, before we get started, I just wanted to ask you what your connection was with Ashley.
Yeah, so that's jogging my memory a little bit. But if I recall, Ashley reached out to me something like 4 years ago to do a webinar. So that was my first interaction with Ashley. I think that was back in 2021. And then I think 2 years later in 2023, we did another webinar where I moderated the panel. So I've interacted with Ashley a number of times now, and it's always been my pleasure to work with Ashley.
That's great. Yeah, I met Ashley through the ADAPT program, but she's been a great mentor to me, a great friend, and I've had a great time doing this and getting to know more people in the field of law. So with that, how about we just start with some introductions? I was wondering if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you enjoy to do in your free time.
Yeah, sure. So I'll give you a shorter response and then I'll give you the longer one. The short answer is an intellectual property or IP litigation attorney, focusing primarily on patent litigation. What that means is I resolve disputes between patent owners and accused infringers in forums throughout the country, including federal court, as well as the U.S. Patent Office. Currently, I'm a partner at the IP litigation firm Armond Wilson, based here in Newport Beach in Orange County, California. I've been in Orange County now for about 8.5 years, I think, and so far so good. Now, in terms of the longer answer, I was actually born and raised in New York City. I was born in Manhattan. I grew up in Flushing, Queens, which I think some of you may know has a very significant Asian population. I think it's over 2/3 now. I am the son of immigrant parents. I also happen to be the little brother of 3 older sisters. And I guess growing up, my mom was a seamstress. My father was a cook or a chef at various Chinese restaurants. He passed away back in 2007. In terms of schooling, from kindergarten through the 12th grade, I guess, attended public schools in the New York City public school system. And, I think I was fortunate to attend Bronx High School of Science, which happens to be one of the 3 original specialized science and math high schools in New York City. I think that opportunity really set the stage for at least some of who I am today. After high school, I attended MIT, and then after that, I went on to law school at Ohio State in Columbus. Eventually, I landed a job here in Orange County at the firm Kenobi Martins, which is one of the largest full-service IP law firms in the country. And that's also where I got my initial training in what it is I do today. So I was at Kenobi Martins for a little over 4 years before moving over to my current firm, where basically I continued to practice IP litigation. I guess to answer the second part of your question, what do I enjoy in my free time? Admittedly, there's not always a lot of free time, but when I do have time, I enjoy spending time with my dog, Sandy. She means the world to me, and she's taught me so much. I also enjoy occasionally unwinding with a good TV show. Lately, I've been watching MasterChef. I can't cook.
Nice.
I can't cook, but at least that's what I tell people. But I do enjoy, cooking TV shows, particularly those that are competition based. So that's a little bit about me.
Nice. Yeah, my family's a huge fan of cooking shows. Chopped and Cutthroat Kitchen were a couple of our favorites throughout the years. So definitely can't cook like you as well, but I still enjoy watching them go to work. So
absolutely, yeah.
Well, I actually wanted to ask you about your college experience because I saw that you studied aerospace engineering with a minor in science, technology, and society. But I was just wondering how you ended up doing law because I feel aerospace engineering is a very meticulous, like very centered field where you could go into like one thing. But I think to go into law, it's interesting how you ended up there. So,
Yeah, sure. So the short answer is I never thought about going to law school until I decided to at pretty much the last minute, right? Rewinding a bit, back in high school, I was largely science and math oriented. In fact, I even spent 2 summers doing biochemistry research at a lab at the NYU School of Medicine. Back then, I don't know that I knew exactly what it is that I wanted to do, but I definitely had thoughts and probably serious thoughts about getting a PhD or an
mm,
MD or an MD PhD. Part of that probably stemmed from my science-focused education. Some of that probably stemmed from my dad passing away from cancer when I was in high school. Ultimately, I decided against becoming, for example, a medical doctor because I knew that if I became a doctor, I would probably want to become some sort of a surgeon, maybe, for example, a cardiothoracic surgeon. Although I would be helping people, and I think that's great, I think the idea that even if I do everything right, the fact that I can't save everyone, for me, I thought that was going to be too emotionally taxing. And so I decided
mm,
against going down that path. When I started college at MIT, I pretty much started with a clean slate in terms of career goals. I had no idea what it is I wanted to do. I did eventually realize that becoming an engineer is also not what I wanted to do. The reason being that oftentimes, particularly at large companies, and this is, I don't want to generalize, but I do think this is often the case. At large companies, you can spend, most, if not all of your career working on basically just one thing, right? And that's not really what I wanted. I wanted something that I thought would be a little bit more varied and also something that would allow me to, I guess, utilize my competitive nature. And I guess I think in part due to my humanities coursework. So as you mentioned, I minored in science, technology, and society, right? I think that is what resulted in the idea of law school coming to my mind. And then I had always been a great writer as well, which is important
mm.
for being a lawyer because writing is in fact a lot of what you do on a daily basis. And, long story short, I just took the dive. I think I took the LSAT towards the very end of my junior year of college. As a senior, I started applying to law schools. And ultimately, after graduating from college, I went straight to law school. And here I am today.
Nice. Yeah, that's a great story. It's always interesting to see how career paths change. I've talked to a lot of different people, and I actually started off doing psychology in college, but biology is kind of the niche that I've found and enjoyed. So I'm hoping that it'll eventually lead to something with IP. You were talking about how you wanted to do something that challenged you and something that allowed you to be creative too. Would you say that at your current role at Armond Wilson, you've had that opportunity and you enjoy what you do there?
Yeah, I absolutely enjoy what I do now. I guess two things. One, I like the fact that every day is a little bit different. Being a
Sure.
lawyer, certainly there are periods or weeks or even months where you may be working on one thing, but generally speaking, there's variation in what you do and variation in your day-to-day work. For example, some days maybe I'm working on an IPR at the PTAB, right? Or some days I may be working on a district court case. Some days I might be drafting a brief, and some days I might be, helping to prep a witness for deposition. I love the variety. I think it keeps me, interested in what it is I do. And I also like working with the people I work with. A lot of people talk about firms, but ultimately it comes down to who it is you're working with. That's what really matters. And so, I love what I do, and I think it's challenging. The thing about patent litigation is you deal with all types of technologies, right? It could be as complex as things in the semiconductor field,
Mm,
software. It could be as simple as we had a case where our client was Targus and it was checkpoint friendly backpack, right? Simple
mm.
technology, but you get to deal with all types of technologies, and learning the new technology is definitely always a challenge because, my background's in aerospace engineering. And
Yeah.
honestly, I rarely use what it is I learned as far as aerospace goes, but the ability to problem solve and think and learn new things.
And then when you went into law, did you always plan on doing IP, or was it more something that you just figured, oh, it just fit well, and then I wanted to do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say as far as IP, it was part based on the market and part based on opportunity. I think naturally when you have a technical background, people assume that you might be interested in patent law, right? And
Mm,
and so that's where the
yeah.
opportunities are. Patent law can be, generally speaking, one of two things. It could be patent prosecution, it could be patent litigation. I would say I knew pretty early on that I did not want to do patent litigation, I
Mm,
personally, even though I deal with technology a lot on a daily basis sometimes, I personally really enjoy the law. An opportunity came to do patent law and hopefully patent litigation, and I took it. And so that's
mm,
kind of how I landed where I am now. But
yeah.
again, it's oftentimes the opportunity that presents itself. I'll be honest. I mean, if I wasn't doing patent litigation, I'd probably be happy doing some other type of litigation, whether it be, securities litigation, general commercial litigation. I just
Mm,
enjoy litigating. It's kind of who I am, and I'm glad that that's what I got to do.
yeah. You seem like because of your background, you have such a wide range that you're able to do so many things. I wanted to ask you also about some of the biggest challenges through your career, because as we've talked, it sounds like you've kind of just been a little bit all over the place and trying out different things. And what do you think is something that really challenged you, but maybe something that you grew from and became stronger from?
I think for me, one of the biggest challenges in my career so far, and I've been practicing for a little less than a decade, but I would say the biggest challenge in my career so far was early on as a first year associate. There's always a risk when you join a law firm that you might get pigeonholed into a particular practice area that's
Mm,
not what you're interested in, right?
yeah.
So as I mentioned, my previous firm was a full service IP firm. And what that means is that they do both IP litigation as well as non-litigation work, namely patent prosecution. For me, as a first year associate, it's not unusual to be light on work as you ramp up. I did what I had to do, which is, I took on some patent prosecution work early on in my career.
Mm,
Although it's not quite what I wanted to do, I think in hindsight, I'm actually very glad that I had the experience because I think it absolutely makes me a better patent litigator, right? Because although it's absolutely not necessary to have patent prosecution experience to do patent litigation, I find that it often helps me understand or identify certain issues better or faster than my peers. Now, the challenge behind all of this was getting enough litigation work, right? I didn't want to be pigeonholed into a practice I was not interested in. For me, it was imperative to put myself out there and to knock on doors, which is what I did. Ultimately, it worked out. And I think the lesson here is to not be afraid to ask for what you want, right? Because you're never going to get
mm.
what you want if you don't ask.
Yeah, that's some great advice. I think I try to, reach out for what I want to. That's something that it's good advice for anybody who is trying to
Absolutely.
get what they want. Yeah, and trying to get there. But talking about advice, do you have any other big advice or things that could help people?
That's a broad question, but that I would give to anyone would be to go out there, meet people, and make connections. Generally speaking, I would say I can be an introverted person. I
Mm,
think that's changed a bit over the years and continues to change. I think I've come out of my shell quite a bit compared to when I was in grade school, for example. But when I was younger, I was often very quiet and reserved. And to be clear, there's nothing wrong with being a quiet person, right? And there's absolutely a time and a place for doing more listening as opposed to speaking and being the loudest person in the room, right? But I think there are benefits, both personal and professional to networking and going out there and meeting people. And for me, that's something I wish I
for
had done
sure.
a better job of, for example, in college and law school. For me, academics are certainly important, but as you'll see later in life, the connections you make are just as important. I guess that's the advice, or at least one piece of advice I would give to others.
Now in your current job, you're a little more extroverted.
I think I've definitely grown out of my shell. I would say
Mm,
I'm very talkative when it comes to people I know.
yeah.
In fact, if you know me too well, you might tell me to shut up, or maybe I talk too
Oh
much.
God.
It's always hard, I think, for a lot of people, even those who are actually good at it. It's hard to just walk up to a random person and say hello and start a conversation. But generally speaking, I am far more extroverted and talkative now than I was, say, 10 years ago. Am I perfect? Absolutely not. There's still a long
Mm.
ways for me to go. But I do think I'm a much better person now than I was back when I was a kid.
Does your current job require a lot of talking and teamwork and things like that, or is it a little more solo work and independent?
Yeah, I would say it varies. It varies depending
Yeah.
on the particular task you're working on at a given time. Here's an example. Sometimes I'm working on a brief, drafting a brief, and that could take me days or weeks or depending on what it is. And for me, I kind of take on the hybrid work model. I sometimes work from home, I sometimes work from the office. That depends in part on what I'm working on or whether I think collaborating with someone would be helpful. There are days when all I'm doing is drafting a brief. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to stay home, which I'm not interacting with much anyone else other than maybe my girlfriend or my dog. But in
Yeah.
the office, there are times when you do really have to coordinate with other people. I would
Mm.
say, generally speaking, litigation is a job where you interact with people a lot more than, at least in person, than you would if you were doing patent prosecution. And that's one of the nice things about litigation is you get to actually talk to people and work with people. And that's a lot of what work is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then kind of more of a fun question. What are three words that have best depicted your personal and professional journey?
Oh, wow. That's a tough one.
Yeah.
I would say the first word is growth. Whether you're talking about 10 years back or 20 years back or 30 years back, I've grown so much, both professionally and personally. Even in the context of being a lawyer, I've been a lawyer now for about 8.5 years. I went from not knowing anything, quite frankly, to being someone now who can almost handle a case completely on my own. And even personally, I feel like I am more understanding as a person. In some ways, I'm still a kid, but I think I've matured a lot. The number of milestones that have come by over the years. I just recently got engaged.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. But growth is definitely a big one, and I think there's a whole lot of growth to be had moving forward. So growth is definitely number one. I think I'm going to cheat a little bit and combine the next two words, but risk and opportunity. In other words, accepting risk and not being afraid to take on new opportunities. I feel like in life there are going to be opportunities that come by, and maybe some are risky, some aren't, but just being open to new opportunities. And one thing is, as a lawyer, I feel like lawyers are generally risk adverse. I think
Yeah.
I don't quite fit in that mold. Generally speaking, I do think I have a much higher risk tolerance than most lawyers. And I think, as you get older, I think it's important to kind of look at it because look, things are risky, but look, you only live once.
Yeah.
Right? I'm not suggesting doing some dangerous stuff, but I mean, just thinking about the stock market, I do follow and invest in stocks, and I would say I have investments that are a lot riskier than others. And so things like that. I'm a risk taker, and I'm not
Mhm.
afraid to take on new opportunities. And so that's kind of defined who I am today, I think.
Yeah. Thank you for the great advice. Thank you for sharing your story. I really enjoyed to learn more about you, Joseph.
Thank you, Eli. I appreciate it.